Hello, workers and friends. Welcome back to Working Class Revolt. I'm your host, Dust James, the Marxist Leninist truck driver, coming to you from my dad's humble home in rural North Carolina. Um, so we're going to get this underway. As always, I got my great co-host from down under, labor organizer, union organizer, brother David Fox. How's it going?
Yeah, good. Been very busy, and I'll explain a little bit more why when we do the updates.
Right on, right on. So we're very honored to have a great guest with us today. I met the brother with on the Ewoks Unhinged program, and he is a young revolutionary Borinquen nationalist. How you doing, brother?
I'm really good. Thank you guys for having me. It's an honor to be in Working Class Revolt.
Right on. We're glad to have you. So I
Welcome.
guess we'll get right into new labor updates and news updates. We're kind of reverting back to our earlier format. For folks, for long time fans of the show, you can check out our earlier stuff. And in our earlier stuff, we would arrange the show with labor and news updates, do an interview, and then do a workshop. And we're trying to go back to that format. We might still do some panel discussions here or there, but it looks like we're going back to this format. So, if brother David Fox, if you want to start us out with a labor update.
Certainly. Well, first of all, update Australia. We obviously the federal election is high on the list. Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister himself, is a lot more unpopular than I think he ever was. And for example, I'll just mention we've been really busy with that because the union work is linked up with it all. And I was out yesterday, and if you're wondering what the term letterboxing is to those who are overseas, it's basically we can go around and we just drop flyers and information off in people's letterboxes. So we might pick a neighbourhood or a particular suburb, we map it out where who's doing what, and I've been distributing this around. And there's a picture of our Prime Minister, and of course his famous quote, "Not my job," aimless, blameless, and completely shameless, but also should be called completely useless as well. And some information on the back there from what we call Victoria Trades Hall, which is the peak union body in the state of Victoria. And it's some really great information on there as well, and the little QR codes and etc. So involved in that. So that's been a big thing as well. And another big thing, and this is all linked up, the manufacturing campaign my union has been consistent on. It's really high up there on the list. And what's been interesting, if you've actually go on to Facebook and say for Bendigo Trades Hall, which is our local union body here, what we've been doing every Friday night, Friday evening for an hour, is what we call a digital street stall through the We Are Union digital army. And so a few of us get together, we open up the Facebooks, and then we just spread the article far and wide to generate the algorithms more to various groups and pages, and hopefully everyone shares it up. We've got one there with a megaphone petition at the moment about cost of living, and surprising enough, well, it's not surprising to me, but what's really interesting is the two main issues that people have been looking at was cost of living and manufacturing. Interesting enough, so that links in with the job security and a strong domestic economy. So they get the highest hits engagement. So it's just something a little interesting food for thought. And it basically cost of living down here is huge. I think CPI is around about 5.1%. I know the Labor opposition has come out and supported a 5.1% pay increase as well, a little bit higher for all workers. And obviously the arbitration, now known as the Fair Work Commission, is obviously up in arms about government interference in that as well. But however, I think everyone knows this is a real huge issue for everyone here, because even like we're no different from anywhere around the world. The cost in our living expenses, from groceries right through to petrol or fuel, many other things, utilities, everything's going up. And not last week before, interest rates are going up. I feel for all those people who've recently just put a deposit on a house. It's going up huge. So if you're paying off like 2,300 a month, you can see that increasing even more now. And working families are going to find it very hard to get by. I wouldn't be surprised. There's going to be foreclosures, and even too now rents are at the sky roof. There's not enough rental property, so people are in fact living in their cars. I mean, these are working people living in cars, tents, wherever they can get, or have to share house at times as well. So the crisis here, it's from everything from housing right through to just basic costs of living. It's huge for us here in Australia.
Thank you, brother, for that update. If I can get maybe a few words in stateside, maybe I can get a bit of a macro analysis on this. Conditions had rapidly been deteriorating since the recent crash that was inevitable, but triggered by the outbreak, triggered by the virus. When that hit and the CARES Act hit, the United States printed more U.S. dollars than was in existence at the time. This has had huge effects on inflation. Large portions of the economy shut down. Probably one of the one things that kept things as stable as it was because of China's zero COVID policy, which resulted with shorter lockdowns, more precise lockdowns, and a mass testing system within their national healthcare system. And China's labor was largely undisturbed by the COVID crisis compared to the United States. And then let's fast forward to the other break point was the intervention, the heroic defensive intervention against NATO imperialist aggression coming from the Nazi-controlled government in Ukraine. This was another flashpoint. This had other huge disruptions in the economy. The United States and NATO and the imperialists tried to cut off the Russians from the economy. The ruble had a sharp drop, but they have a material economy. They have real goods. They have wheat. They have fertilizer. They have oil. So a few weeks later, the ruble went all the way back up. So Russia's doing fine. But what happened? Because Russian goods have been isolated from Europe and from the United States to some extent, this crisis of inflation has gone even further. When we first saw the immediate response was gas went up in my state to $4.20, and then it went back down a little bit, and now it's right back up there at $4.20. We're looking at real inflation on groceries and other living expenses, really around 30%, and it hits working people who the majority of their income is on basic living expenses, more so than people in the middle class, and especially more than the rich. And it's scary times. We're seeing rise in crime. We're seeing instability. We're seeing rise in mental health issues, domestic violence across the board. That's even increasingly worse since the current economic crisis. Brother Pedro X, if you could give us a labor update. A labor update is when you talk about the conditions that you either personally face or are faced by your community.
Well, the labor update that I have is that so far in Puerto Rico, there's been mind you, I'm in the diaspora, but I still like to keep in touch with what happens in the homeland. There has been a large amount of strikes that have been led by teachers, workers, firefighters. It was so bad that even the police are talking about it. But then I recently learned that they kind of punked out from getting into the protest because they decided to side with the Financial Control Board. And for those who don't know, the Financial Control Board is the reason why there are these massive strikes going on. and they have their origin in that in 2016 the Obama-Biden administration sent them over because Puerto Rico got into a $72 billion debt, which we couldn't pay. So they sent them over to do austerity measures on the island, where they are cutting people's pension, like the pensions of teachers. They're cutting people's um, wages. They're also messing with their retirement plans, such as back in the day, they'd have the type of retirement plan where you'd get a retirement from the place that you worked at. But now the Financial Control Board has changed that and said, okay, now instead of getting a specific program, teachers, for example, are going to have to take out money out of their pocket to put it in a bank. And then after they retire, that's what they live off of. When most of them have to work they have to work three jobs just to survive. So they have to take out a little bit from those earnings and invest in that. And that's not been good. So a lot of workers have risen up right now to fight against it. And it's not just workers; there's students from La FUPI, which is the biggest university in Puerto Rico. Um, because the Financial Control Board has been trying to slash the funding off of that school. The theory of many, including myself, is that they're trying to slash the funding of the school because that school has a lot of pro independence and pro nationalist teachers there who radicalize the students and teach them their real history, which makes them want to follow the examples of our nationalist figures. And it's not just been them. There's been the Peep Party, which is the Puerto Rican Independence Party. They've been in the thick of it. Everybody is getting in. There's also been firefighters, former workers of the electric company that just got privatized. Literally, we only need the police, and the strike will be complete because they've been suffering too. Their pensions have been getting messed with, as well as their salaries. But for now, what I know is that they're on strike, and we haven't seen something this big since, in my opinion, since probably like the 30s. We had big strikes in the 30s, but yeah, that's my labor update.
Thank you. Yeah, I missed a few details on mine. When I said that the U.S. printed more money than was existence at the time, unlike the right-wing myth that, oh, the inflation is because of, the little pittance of stimulus that we received, the vast majority of that went to the corporations and monopolies themselves and bailed out those monopolies. Let's see. As far as news updates, I have one to offer. I believe Finland. They are considering having Finland join NATO, and this is very concerning around the entire situation. Germany has upped their defense spending. There's recently been an investigation that there is Nazis and neo-Nazis within the German security forces, and military and police. There's a lot going on. If you look at historically from World War II, it was Germany that fought, Nazi Germany fought against Russia. If you go back as far as Finland, if you go back to the Soviet Revolution, the Finland attacked the Soviet Union. So these are key countries that have, attacked Russia historically, along with Ukraine, going back to Napoleon, and then again in World War II. The U.S. has been funding Nazis since the fall of the Nazis. Ever since the Nazis and the U.S. stopped officially being enemies, the United States have backed Nazi forces in the Ukraine. Culminating with that coup, we're seeing a desperate empire that's quickly losing hegemony, trying to strike out and be further aggressive, and it could cause real human pain and suffering and war, and it already has. There is a global crisis of starvation, particularly in Africa, as Russia economy has been, it's doing well, but they've been having to focus on themselves with some of the sanctions that hit, and they're not being able to produce for export the same amount of grain and fertilizer. Along with Ukraine is not allowed to export grain at a rate, and it's causing a global rise in food crisis and food prices. So there's a lot going on with that. Let's see, Brother David Fox, any response to those ideas?
Yeah, well, the thing is, Finland and even Sweden too, to join NATO, it's actually really will be a cause of concern, because that will then basically escalate conflict in the region even further. Turkey had came out. I was reading through RT. Turkey has said they're going to veto it at this stage. Erdogan is certainly not going to accept that as well, because for a country to be accepted in NATO, they need a complete 100% vote. But if one country vetoes it, sorry, they can't join. And it's actually in Finland's best interest to stay neutral, because once you become part of NATO, you're basically under the. I'll just put you on mute. You basically you lose any of your independence through your military and stuff. You're pretty much at Washington's dictates, really, in military, not just economically, and that's when it ties it all up. Obviously, they might get to thinking, oh, well, we've got instant protection if we're attacked. Not really. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. But the fact is, you're losing your own sovereignty, really, by rights, if you accept to go into that bloc. NATO should have been real. Going back on the history of it, it was originally set up to go against the Soviet Union. The fact is, when the Soviet Union was deliberately dismantled, and I'll say that in commas, deliberately dismantled in the early 90s, the fact is it should have been disbanded. There was no need for it anymore. But the Pentagon, Washington, wanted to keep it going even further, and hopefully then to break up the regions further, not just the Eastern Bloc, but into Russia, and hopefully balkanise Russia. And like as what's correctly just shown here again, I'll show this, yes, to have more control, destabilise the region, and have more direct control of the natural resources that currently is in Russia at the moment. It is a cause of concern, and certainly we do not need this anymore. It just comes to show that imperialism itself needs war. And for us in Australia as well, what's looking at the Pacific here, it's looking to have another form of NATO involved here as well. So you would have Canada, US, Japan, Republic of Korea, not the DPRK, but the Republic of Korea, otherwise known as South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and that as a NATO-style bloc in the Pacific. But the thing is, the mess they're going to create here for us, and after our Federal Defence Minister, Peter Dutton, on Anzac Day announced that we must prepare for war in order to have peace, which is very concerning. Australia is not capable of supporting itself in a war anymore. We haven't got the industry to do it. 1. 2, we will greatly suffer. 3, it'll be like another Ukraine, basically. It'll be a nest of, it'll be a horrible place. And I don't think actually really by rights of people will start slowly waking up. We have no appetite for it. So this thing is it's not just specifically around Europe, but look what's also happening in our region in the Pacific as well. And it comes to show you that US imperialism itself is on the decline, and they're doing whatever they can to try and stay in that top position, but they're losing. Every time they know it, they're losing. Over to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to expand on some of these issues, especially with our guest, Pedro X. And I actually watch a lot of nationalist groups, particularly Pan-African groups. I'm not going to mention names, but they made an interesting point on one of them, and that was that the Soviet Revolution was an anti-colonial revolution. It was an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist revolution. The Tsarist Russia was kind of like a junior vassal state, a semi-feudal junior vassal state used as a pawn against Asia. And when they had a workers' revolution, it was an anti-colonial revolution because they went in direct conflict with the imperialists that were holding down the global South. And then after the Soviet Union fell, and you had the neoliberal 90s and economic disasters, and then the rise of Putin. Putin was firstly largely accepted by the capitalists, but when Putin nationalized the resources, started reinvesting with the economy, started forming alliances with oppressed nations, with Iran, with Syria, with China. It was quite, the U.S. and the imperialists made it quite clear that Russia was not going to join the imperialist club and imperialist bloc. And now, we saw that the U.S. position somewhat fell with its fall of the currency, with this era of inflation and this economic crisis. And I think that in those conditions, I'm not saying that Russia planned this. I don't think they did. I think they were responding to a humanitarian disaster on their border. But the tectonic plane was shifting towards a more multipolar world, and this was really an opportunity for Russia to assert its dominance, to show that it cannot be touched, that it cannot be kept out of the economy, and it showed its proof. And then I'm big on Mexican politics. A lot of my community is from Mexico, and people like AMLO were able to, in this, first of all, almost nobody in the global South went along with the sanctions against Russia. It's only the so-called international community, U.S., Europe, Australia, Japan. It's only them. And the global South basically didn't go along with it all. And now you have countries like Mexico asserting their dominance and declaring, property over their lithium mines and over their resources. And we're seeing a space for oppressed countries, in this changing rise of the multipolar order to do better policies. Now the U.S. is losing their dominance. I mean, they're still in power to really have the space to implement programs to help their people. And, even though we're experiencing worse conditions with the fall of the U.S. dollar, and we're experiencing worse conditions in the U.S., the monopoly capitalists, the imperialists, we as workers have opportunities to fight against them as well. Imperialism is interconnected between the oppression. It is two main contradictions, the national oppression and the oppression of the working class. And if the oppressed nations can rise up, that is good for the working class. And if the working class can rise up against the monopoly capitalists, it's good for the oppressed nations. So we're seeing real opportunities to organize and fight against humanity's common enemy, the imperialism led by U.S. imperialism. Brother Pedro X, any response to any of those ideas?
Oh, most definitely. Listen, just because even though Russia is not socialist and Putin is definitely not a Marxist-Leninist, his alliance to the global South has been incredible. Like just to add, for example, what you said about AMLO, I was talking to Marcos, who you've brought here as a guest. Me and him were talking, I think, last night or 2 days ago, and he was telling me how in Mexico, people were trying to tell AMLO, "Oh, there's a lot of Russian spies within your country," and AMLO was pretty much like, "Okay, we have the right to have him here. That's our business, not yours." And which is good because we haven't seen a Mexican president ever stand up to the United States in a long, long time. Venezuela, they've made they've been making alliances with Putin for a while. I remember one time I saw Chavez give Putin like an honorary sword as a reward, and like I think also a gift of friendship. And I'm pretty sure they also have given them weapons and stuff like that to make their military stronger. Um, Argentina, I literally learned this morning that Argentina has a $47 billion debt. They asked Putin to help him out, and Putin was like, "Sure, I'll help you." And they're also in the process of getting into the Belt and Road Initiative, which would be really good for Argentina. It would be really good for them. So yeah, I really do like. I just really like even I just like the alliances that are slowly being built within the global South, because it's really good for it's just really good for these countries that haven't had their sovereignty in Latin America's case for 500 years. It's really good. Also, if those countries are strong and there were to be a big Latin nationalist movement here, and we want to connect in the same way that the Pan Africanists like Malcolm wanted to connect with Africa, a strong Latin America would be really beneficial for us. And if we could also connect with countries like Russia and China and Iran, that would just make the situation better. So, despite us struggling here a little bit in the U.S., with the fall of the dollar and gas prices going up a little bit, I think it's worth the sacrifice for the greater good of humanity.
Mm, interesting. And maybe if I could just respond,
Most definitely.
just so the guests don't get confused.
Hmm.
Um, Pedro X means that the condition, the worsening. We've had it good in the imperialist country. I'm not saying like super good. Like we're
Oh,
exploited,
of
we're
course, of
oppressed. Things
course.
have been getting worse for the last 30, 40 years.
Oh, most
But
definitely,
but
yeah.
compared to the global South,
Oh.
it's much better here.
Hmm.
And to see on just from a global humanitarian scale,
Yeah.
a billion people have been lifted out of poverty in China since the U.S. has been declining. In this current era of even further decline, the vast improvement in conditions and our brothers and sisters in the global South is a wonderful and beautiful thing.
Hmm.
And he is not aligning with the liberals who say,
No, no,
hey, we have to accept worse conditions to fight against Russia.
no, by
It's
no
not,
means. No, by no means. I'm not saying
that
that.
is
I know
that
that.
ain't.
I know life is here. Life here is hard. Trust me, I'm not speaking from that perspective. I'm just simply pointing out that even though we're struggling a little bit now, it's for the greater good, and I don't. And even that's despite the worsening conditions, because it doesn't compare to. It obviously doesn't compare to the global South. But I'm not saying that there isn't any suffering. No, no way. Glad. Thank you, Dust, for clearing that up, because I don't want anyone thinking that I'm saying something absurd out here.
All right, let's see. Any response, David, or any other news items to bring forth?
That's generally what it is at the moment. I just wanted to link all those items I was announcing before all in together because everything's connected. They're not separate from each other. But obviously, then look, I just also too want to emphasise the fact homelessness and poverty is here in Australia. It's been here for quite a long time. It affects a lot of communities, especially First Nations communities as well. They suffer from that very badly. But it's also it's branching out everywhere else. It's not just like happening. We're in crisis. Everyone's losing homes or whatever. This has been happening for some time now, but it's speeding up. And it's really coming into the media's attention a lot more than just a one-off story, happen to be a one-off news item or a TV program. This is now a lot more in the news than what it has been in the past. And I think one thing it's important to emphasise on. I think it's as the material conditions change. This is where it's important that we have good education, that people understand that it's the system itself that needs changing. And we need to actually build organisation on the ground, be it through unions, through community groups, neighbourhood groups, whatever, or any other type of organisation to take it on, because I think we're really coming to that crossroads where it's going to be either I'll use, the name just went straight out of my head, but when the term was either barbarism or socialism, because that's where we'll be heading to. And like I've explained to workers out there, we're no different from anyone else in the world. We're just as equally affected. And being an island nation as well, we're going to see vast shortages and of a lot of our goods and products as well, because we're so import dependent. Now, we got rid of a lot of our manufacturing deliberately. It was deliberately done, and emphasising why it's the importance of having a strong manufacturing sector. What I find interesting as well, I love it when the governments come out and they say, "Oh, how much we've got a robust economy and strong economy." Well, you can't have a strong domestic economy without a huge manufacturing base. The two are interlinked. Once you deindustrialise, how can you call that a strong economy? The only thing you can rely on then is credit. And where's that come from? It's all fictitious capital. So we're basically on we're right on a very thin ice at the moment, and I wouldn't be surprised next thing we open the papers sometime over the next few weeks and they go, well, we're in a depression. So that's where we're heading through. But yeah, this is a global thing. It's not just one of the two. It's not affecting a few countries or Europe. This is a whole global thing. But what's refreshing to hear is that people in the developing world are organising. They're on the march, and that is refreshing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I really like the ideas that Pedro brought about the, this kind of this whole idea that I bring a lot, which is the needs for an alliance between the working class to fight against the monopoly capitalist, the global South to fight against the monopoly capitalist. And I think it's interesting. So we're seeing the ability of socialists with the fall of the decline of imperialism led by the U.S. We're seeing socialist countries and nationalist countries having the ability to invest in their country, nationalize resources with less threat of a response, because the military forces are stretched thin. They don't even occupy countries. They fund terrorists like they did in Syria. They fund Nazis. They destabilize and disrupt. They're not occupied. They just destabilize, disrupt, carry out coups, carry out propaganda campaigns. I mean, it's not even really like a traditional military, but even those resources are being stretched with so many people rising up, and them losing their power. Mm. And I think that the interplay with worsening conditions here, I think it's important for us as anti-imperialists not to be accelerationists, not to be nihilists. And what I mean by that is we should not cheer on the worsening conditions, even though there is, to an extent, as people face worse conditions and they're less bought off, they're more likely to question that system and go against that system. But at the same time, poverty itself does not create revolutionary movements. What creates revolutionary movements is empowering the people.
Yep.
The people coming together and experiencing victories, and the fight to improve conditions. So as socialists within the imperialist core, we got to put out the message that we want to make things better in the United States, that we want to improve conditions. And to be able to improve conditions, we need to organize a fight back. We need to teach the revolutionary strategy. We need to empower people around us to take with the science, with the understanding, with the tools, and get them off of the drugs and get them out of the destitution and the hopelessness that is absolute poverty that they're forcing on our communities, and have them maintain their independence, stay sober, take care of their family, and join in the fight back. let's see, Pedro X, any response to either of our ideas, as well as do you have any further news updates before we go on to the interview section?
As far as news updates, I don't have anything at the moment. But just to respond to your ideas, I think what you guys said is true regarding poverty not bringing revolution. Because I can give two examples of my people. First, on the island, when the Americans came in, they pretty much um indebted all the campesinos and took all their small businesses and their farms away completely. Like in the first within like the first couple of years they did that. And there was hunger, and like especially in the 30s, like the early 20s and the 30s, there's hunger, there was disease, there was ignorance, there was people who couldn't read or write. Like people, it was like things were really bad in Puerto Rico. But that didn't produce revolution. What produced revolution was when Pedro Luis Campos came into the Nationalist Party and was able to get them out of the classroom and say, "All right, we're going to go to the masses right now." And they were able to win several victories, which got him to, which earned him the mass support of the Puerto Rican people, especially in the, well, actually throughout his whole life, if I'm not mistaken, actually throughout his whole life, as I was saying, yeah. And it was because he was able to win a couple of strikes. The most famous one was the 1934 strike, where he not only won the strike for these workers, but also got their wages, like got them better wages. And yeah, like even, and that's what people, and now people are looking into, in Puerto Rico, are starting to study his legacy and see how he was able to do it slowly but surely because of how bad the situation is. As for the diaspora, it was the same thing. Puerto Ricans were mistreated, living in pretty similar conditions to the island, except in places like Chicago and New York. But what got them to stand up? It was the Young Lords Party, who decided to take a lot of Albizu's ideas and mix it with Marxism Leninism and empower the community, where they're able to get them off drugs, give them breakfast, even going as far as to occupy a church and a hospital with the mass support of the Puerto Rican community. And people still to this day remember those victories. Just talk to any Puerto Rican from New York or Chicago, and they'll tell you about the Young Lords, especially the older ones. So yeah, it's organization and discipline what brings revolution, not necessarily terrible conditions, even though they can really help galvanize the masses to your cause.
Mm. Thank you, Pedro. Any further updates on the global situation before we go into the interview?
Well, actually, I just remembered one, but this one happened a while back. It was when all the countries in the world were condemning the embargo in Cuba. The Puerto Rican people actually rose up and also condemned it, even though they're not their own country. When I heard that, I was like, man, it makes me proud. Finally, we're reaching out to our brothers and sisters in Cuba.
How long ago? When was that?
That was a couple months ago, actually. I just
Okay.
remembered it because not many people were talking about it, and I just felt like sharing it.
Right on. Very, very, very inspiring. So we're going to get into our interview portion. This is the first time we've had brother Pedro X, comrade Pedro X, on the show. I'm guessing that is a homage to brother Malcolm.
Yep.
The X
Yes.
on there.
Yes.
Let's see if you look at the picture. If anybody can see the thumbnail, we have Campos there. Very inspiring revolutionary leader. Maybe this is a political show. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your personal background in regards to politics, as well as some of the work you have done.
Well, so my personal background has been, I've always liked politics, even as a kid. I remember growing up in my house, hearing people debate if Puerto Rico should be a state of the 51st state of the Union, just stay as a commonwealth, which is another word for colony, or become independent. Um, my family is mostly a pro statehood family. Uh, so that's what I grew up being raised as. And I remember that all my life I would hear that the people who believed in Puerto Rican independence were just a fringe group. They never had mass support. They're crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. Just really negative things about them. So I remember one time when I got to middle school, I decided to read up on it because eventually it came to the point when I remember I heard a family member telling me that, oh, Pedro X Campos was a crazy man, a lunatic. And I was like, why? Oh, because he wanted to use armed struggle to free Puerto Rico. And I was like, I mean, in my head, I was like, well, I don't see how that's weird because you don't have a problem with Washington doing it. So why is it okay for Washington but not Albizu? So I just thought that was a bit of a cognitive dissonance being expressed by the family member of mine. So I decided to read into it, and because I wanted to know, so I can have my own opinion at least. And when I started reading about Albizu, I mean, I'm proud to say that he won me over pretty quickly. It was as clear as day. He wasn't crazy. He knew what he was talking about, and he only took up arms because there was literally no other choice left for him. He was forced into that situation. And later, after middle school, as the years would go on, I learned that.
Can I stop you for a second while you're getting onto a new thought? I was wondering, did you spend the most of your time coming up in the United States
Oh,
or in Puerto Rico, and also what, if you're at liberty to say, what general region of the United States?
oh, I'm in the Midwest, in Ohio. No, I was mostly born here. I was mostly raised within the Midwest in the United States in the state of Ohio, but I've been to Puerto Rico a lot of times. So I've seen the Fort, El Morro. I've been all I've seen all those big places, and I've been all around the island. I've even been to the island that got bombed by the U.S. Navy. I saw all of that. I saw like the you can still see the craters that they left behind. They haven't cleaned it up. But I've been to the El Yunque, which is the national rainforest. Yeah, I've been almost everywhere. So on a number of occasions. So I have a pretty good idea how the people live there, but have I lived there for like a whole year or two? No, I haven't. Most of the stuff I know is because I read it and seen it.
That's very powerful. I think if you look at the racial stratification within the labor force,
Hmm.
the oppression of raza in general,
Yeah.
by the police, the discrimination, you can see why people would have, would want to associate, with their homelands,
Yeah.
politically, because of that, national oppression that they
Yeah.
face in the United States.
Yep.
Maybe if you could respond to that as well as continue your story,
Well,
going with middle school. Go ahead.
well, yeah, I can definitely do that because I mean it's probably not a surprise, but I've faced some racism and have to had to deal with national chauvinism, where people talk about us being dominated by the United States, not a part of it. And as I grew, as the years grew, and because I didn't read all of this within just middle school, I read more books on Albizu. I learned that the guy was right in his analysis. But prior to him, I also got my hands on the Autobiography of Malcolm X, and I read about how Malcolm would talk about his people in the diaspora uniting with Africa in a political union. And to me, that just made sense. I was like, oh, duh. Yeah, that's what we should do. But that's what people in Puerto Ricans and other Latinos of the diaspora, they should try to unite with their homelands and unite as a political unit. Um, so that just made sense to me, and that's why in my personal head, I consider Malcolm and Albizu to be my two main big heads of political thought, amongst others. But yeah, but you're right. The national chauvinism, the racism, really what makes is really what forces us. Well, it not for not all. Not, I'm not going to say forces. What I want to say, it plays a hand in us wanting to um be part of our nations, wanting us to identify with them instead of like, the Star Spangled Banner.
Very, very powerful. So sorry I interrupt you twice, but
No, no, you're good.
just
You're
go
good.
ahead and go on with your where you left off and your political discovery, middle school, high school, and adult life.
I mean, it started mostly middle school and high school. Like I said, I just read more on, like one thing leads to another. When you become a leftist, you learn about the Panthers, you learn about the Nation of Islam, you learn about all these things, and um, I mean, I don't know. It just all clicks. It just all clicked to me as a young Latino in the United States. It clicked. It made sense, and I always and just that, and that's why I always try to become well. That's why I became a nationalist, or better yet, a revolutionary nationalist, not a reactionary one. And I always try to promote that idea amongst my peers, like, hey, you're Latino, you're not American. You should be, you should follow. If I talk to a Chicano, I say, hey, you should check out Tijerina. That's your guy, or the Brown Berets. If I talk to someone from El Salvador, I'll mention to them Farabundo Martí. All these different figures, just trying to connect, trying to like make a connection in their heads so they can understand, and then we can all like have some um point to unite per se, like a common unity, because not all of us are Puerto Rican, not all of them will connect with Albizu or Betances, but they'll sure as hell connect with some of the other folks I mentioned because that's where they're from. So I just try to. That's mostly what I would try to do, and I still do it. I was much more open because I was a kid with less responsibilities, but I still do it from time to time when I can.
Let's see. Thank you. So maybe we can talk a little bit
Mhm.
further. I don't want to give away uh, your age. I think you're younger than me and
Yeah,
Fox, um,
yeah.
but I'm not sure your age exactly if you don't want to give that. But maybe you can talk a little bit of what political work you have done since
Oh,
becoming radicalized.
well, I've done a little bit here and there. In the university that I used to go to, I would do a lot of solidarity events for countries like Venezuela, Bolivia. Yeah, Venezuela and Bolivia. Those were the two ones I remember. Where me and this Spanish club would try to raise just general consciousness in the college campus and the community so they can learn about the issues that affect the Latino community as well as our home countries. And in many cases, we'd also talk about other countries too that weren't Spanish speaking or in Latin America. So that was one. I've also not only engaged in political work, I've done um, a lot of church activism where I would help organize three churches to take out food to the homeless. I think that would count as solidarity work. We just all get together, take food, hygiene products, and clothes to the homeless. Do a little prayers for, give them, perform some prayers for them because they really enjoy that. Uh, so yeah, that's some of the organizing I've done in the past. Yeah, like the on the grounds organizing.
Right on, brother. That's very inspiring.
Thanks.
Um, I think we kind of met on Ewoks, and he was doing this thing
Mm-hmm.
like Pan Americanism, and he
Yeah.
was trying to unite Marxist Leninists who
Mm-hmm.
are default patriotic
Mm-hmm.
to their countries, even
Mm-hmm.
even imperialist countries,
Yes.
and you're not down with that because you support the
Oh, you kind of cut off, brother.
diaspora and the people. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
So what I'm saying is you're not a supporter of American
Mm-mm.
patriotism, even though you live in the United States, because you
Mm-hmm.
identify with your home country of Puerto Rico, and you
Mm-hmm.
look at how you look at how the diaspora and Raza and Chicanos are treated in the United States, have
Mhm.
never truly been allowed to be part of this country,
Yeah.
are effectively an oppressed nation and
Mhm.
have the right
Mhm.
not to amalgamate and have the right to be completely independent from the United
Yes.
States. And Marxist Leninists who are patriotic, who have who want to improve conditions, who want an America that's free of both class oppression and national oppression. Like, if we want to overthrow the monopoly capitalists, we got to get rid of all sources of their exploitation, and we have
Mhm.
to build up power and overtake them. And there is this myth in the circles of the American patriot and the Marxist Leninist camp in general, that all people who don't get along with American patriotism, all people who don't want to fly the flag, all people who are like standing up for the rights of oppressed people, they're all into identity politics. They simply want to burn down everything. These people are evil rad libs being manipulated by the Democratic Party to destabilize us, and it's completely absurd, and it's chauvinism. And if
Mhm.
we look at your work and we look what you're doing, you're getting out into the community, you're getting out in the masses, you're getting out in your church organizations, you're telling you're not going out to the people and holding up a picture of Stalin and saying you must bow to Stalin or whatever. You're saying
Oh no, that'd be funny.
we have or whoever it is, like some great revolutionary, and looking down on the people. You're with the people, you're organizing the
Yeah.
people, you're doing what needs to be done. I mean, where I mean, this is completely absurd. You know what I'm trying to
As
say?
as
Go
funny
ahead. Go
as
ahead and respond.
as funny as that whole image you painted is, it's absurd. Nobody
Uh,
does. I don't think
uh,
anybody does that. At least
uh,
not real nationalists, you know.
mm,
But where to begin, man? Well, okay, I'll just begin with Ewoks. So, funny story. The way I got into contact with him was that he put this post in his community where he said that if you're a revolutionary nationalist for your community or your diaspora of an oppressed nation, I respect that. And if you're also a like patriotic for the United States or Canada, I respect that too. And it was talking, and he kind of talked about like them working together. So I simply told him, "Hey, man, I appreciate your solidarity and your camaraderie. Uh, I'm a revolutionary nationalist for Puerto Rico, both the island and the diaspora, and of course, my other Latino brothers and sisters. So I obviously don't support American patriotism. But I think it'd be cool for us to work together under a broad coalition, following a model that was given to us by Dr. King's Poor People's Campaign and later Fred Hampton's Rainbow Coalition. Uh, because we're all coming together as equals. Nobody is waving anyone else's flag. No one's burning their flag. We're just coming together and working in as Marxist Leninists, as comrades. B Level said, "Sure. Would you like to talk about it some more and organize these talks?" And I was like, "Yeah, so let's do it." And that's why he ended up meeting me in his community. As for another thing, I also have a big heart for my African brothers and sisters and indigenous people. I learned about their struggles too, and they inspire me. I just wanted to put it out there. But yeah, like what you said regarding us not being patriotic. I mean, where's the basis for this patriotism? We were never allowed to become part of this country and integrate as citizens, and we were never given the choice to decide if we wanted to or not. And on top of that, they treat us like our people are treated like absolute garbage. They get incarcerated, they get made fun of. The CIA put drugs in our communities during the Iran Contra scandal. And whenever we try to raise our voices, a lot of times the broader Anglo population just looks down at us as if we're complaining or whining. And I'm like, well, I mean, like look at the Colin Kaepernick situation as an example. So I'm like, where is the base? Where is that basis for this patriotism? And what makes the situation, what adds more to the us not being patriotic is we have to look back. We are able to look back at guys like Tijerina and Malcolm and Albizu who clearly, for the same reasons, were nationalists. So, and we just contextualize what they said and apply it to modern times. So it's like yeah, like there's no basis for it. So I don't know why a lot of these people have are national chauvinists to us and put their head in the sand and not want to listen. It makes no sense to me. I don't know what goes on in their heads, man. Maybe you can maybe Dust, you talk to a lot of these people, so maybe you can like add some insight.
Yeah, I think Marxist Leninists, people who are against imperialism in general, are seeing an attack from the rad lib, Democrat influenced identity politics crowd, and they're being attacked. And what they're doing is they don't have an understanding of the national question. They don't understand what poor black and brown people go through. And then when they get it, when the oppressed people rightfully respond to maybe some of the crassness of their positions, they don't even realize they're being crass. They lump them into that rad lib category and don't realize that these are effective. A lot of oppressed nationalists are Marxist Leninists, and
Hmm.
this isn't IDPOL. Oppressed nations is a material condition of super exploitation,
Hmm.
and it is a real material issue that is going to determine how we need to bring about proletarian revolution. It's not like some IDPOL issue they made up to
Hmm.
attack white Marxist Leninists. No, this
No,
is like a material condition that we have to deal with in this country, and then we
if
have
that
to
were the
form an
case,
alliance. Yeah,
if that were the
so,
case, there wouldn't be the debate wouldn't
yeah.
be there wouldn't be a debate in the first place if it was like some weird NGO promoting hatred on white workers. It just be gone with the wind. Like this is like you said, it's a material condition. Like when you look at prison sentences, when you look at things like crack versus cocaine, who gets which one gets you in jail longer, or even things like look at Maria. When Hurricane Maria hit Texas and Puerto Rico, Texas got a lot of help within a couple of days, instantly. But Puerto Rico was left 5 months without electricity. And on top of that, Cuba and Venezuela wanted to help Puerto Rico. And Trump was like, no, you can't do it. So um, we were left without electricity. And I still remember to this day how my mother would call my grandma and talk to her, and she'd tell her, "Oh, there's no electricity. There's no electricity. There's no electricity." And after those 5 months, I remember going to Puerto Rico, and when we were gone I was there for almost a month and 3 days, and in the last 3 days that I was there, the electricity went out. No electricity. The only place that had electricity was the big mall that's run by the monopoly capitalist. Ironically, right? So we were left without electricity for 3 days, and the federal government didn't come to help us at all. Can you imagine if in a state like California, Texas, um, New York, any other state, if this were to happen, there would be riots in the street for just a day without electricity. Not even like just one day. So I can't imagine any of the 50 states taking being without electricity for 3 days. But that's the reality. The majority of these states um are white. Puerto Rico's uh, or the majority of the people there are raza, like you say. So obviously we're gonna get uh a different treatment. So man, it's just so absurd and so frustrating. Yeah. This is a material thing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, brother. I know I've been hogging our guest here, brother David Fox. We're actually getting a little late in the program, and we need to move on to our workshop. Brother Fox, is there any additional questions for our guest?
Well, I actually did. I was just making down some key notes. I think you mentioned earlier on about struggle for independence for Puerto Rico. The independence movement itself. Where is it at the moment? Is it a pretty strong movement in Puerto Rico?
Unfortunately, it isn't because of all the COINTELPRO and all the co-op and all the assassinations that came with it, and all the incarceration and the torture. So due to it, many people have been scared by it. To the point that if you were to join the PIP party, the Puerto Rican Independence Party, which is a pure electoral party, only focusing on legal, quote unquote, legal means, following all the rules. If you were to join just that party, people will jokingly but not jokingly say, oh, you're going to end up in a file somewhere. And people know. So they're getting scared. But there is a positive, despite all the negativity, due to all of the national chauvinism, like with the Financial Control Board and us getting abandoned for 5 months with electricity. You see that slowly people in Puerto Rico are starting to slowly look into their history again and want to learn. And as far as the diaspora goes, it's the same. There's no Young Lords movement because they also got crumbled by the U.S. government. But you talk to someone, a Puerto Rican from New York, they still respect these figures and the independence figures very much, and they still hold them in high regards. And that's still positive, if you ask me, because that means if you hold them in high regards, they'll make you want to read about them in the future. And many of them do.
Yeah.
But it's not as strong as it used to be.
Yeah. Nothing to I just want to ask, because I know Puerto Rico was hit by a hurricane, I think when Trump was still president a few years ago, and that really decimated the island. And Trump just basically washed his hands of it, basically no aid whatsoever. Just so I know, the conditions down in Puerto Rico, obviously, look, it might sound like a Dorothy Dixon question, but how far have they recovered from that hurricane? The effects of it?
Probably, but by a little bit. It's not that much better. I've been to my grandmother's barrio where she lived, where she still continues to live, and a lot of the houses are still not. A lot of the houses in that barrio are not. They're not. They're not. They're still like torn down. They're not rebuilt. They're not fixed. You look at the roads; they're not fixed. If you go to a mountainous area, you'll see all the roads are not developed. Like there's not really much of a difference from um from the hurricane to now. No, not really. Unfortunately. And I personally think that in those mountainous areas that didn't get us hit as hard by the hurricane, I think that they've always been underdeveloped regardless. So yeah.
Let's see, Brother Fox, any further questions before I move on to the workshop portion?
No, I have no further questions. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
All right. Maybe I could just like sum up and just give the viewers, before we move on to the interview question, just a basic summary of national oppression as a material condition. Puerto Rico, ever since the Jones Act I think they still have to, nothing is allowed to be shipped directly to Puerto Rico.
Yep.
Everything has to go to Florida.
Yep.
And then to Puerto Rico. Yep. Which raises prices. And then, so just in that alone, just for basic necessities, the masses of Puerto Rican people are paying more, that are being extorted from the island and being put directly into the hands of the monopoly capitalism. And
yeah,
it's absolutely insane. So they're kept in worse conditions to make super profits. And then if we look at the oppressed nations, if you look at the Afro-American people, they were kept in slavery, and then freed from slavery, they were kept in in horrible conditions with the new Jim Crow. And then if you look at the Great Migration, where they went to largely urban areas, they were put in ghettos and kept in those places, and then those places received less resources. And you look at the Chicano people, where the land was stolen from the by the United States, and the people that were still there are treated like second-class citizens in their own community. Also kept in barrios, also kept in rural areas with less services, harassed by the police, paid less in jobs, put down further into the labor force. I mean, this I don't understand. People need to understand, if you are a white socialist in the United States, you need to understand the national question, because if you want to go deeper and lower into the proletariat, you are going to have to deal with people of oppressed nations. And a lot of the labor aristocracy is crumbling, and that it's good. But if you really want to organize the people and organize those with the most revolutionary potential, those who are sick and tired of the system, who have nothing to lose but their change, you're going to be organizing poor black and brown people. And you got to get this through your heads. I know that's my conclusion for that segment. Any response before we move on to the other section?
Just two. The first one would be not only are we paying more when it comes to the Jones Act, but we're getting the food that we get. It's not even in its best condition. It would be much easier if we could get food from like a neighboring Caribbean island like Española, or any of the smaller English-speaking islands. But instead, it has to go to Florida and then come back. The food's not the best, and the worst part is that a lot of the products that we get are not even written in Spanish. They're just in English. You go into the malls in Puerto Rico, all the signs are either in English or they're English and Spanish, but the English words are bigger and you can see them from far away, and the Spanish words are smaller. The prices are in English. Literally, almost everything is in English. They don't even have the decency to hide the colonialism anymore, which is totally embarrassing. And the second thing is, white socialists, be like Dust James, not like Hawes. Yeah, Dust James knows the national question. He's been a real one, and he respects us. People, that's how. If you follow his example, I guarantee, there will be more. There's going to be more unity in the tomorrow. That's what I got to say.
See, I wanted to bring something up, but David Fox, I saw you itching to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah. Look, just conclusion for us here in Australia. I mean, yeah, we have to listen to the First Nations people and engage with them. I like the old term "black and white unite and fight," because they have to be part of the anti-imperialist struggle and the struggle for socialism as well, and play a big role in that. And we're also too migrant communities of all sorts. There's a working class, it's not just white. There's also a lot of migrant communities as well. A lot of them are in low wage jobs or very poverty line wages as well. We also have those that are brought in for seasonal work from various Pacific islands, and they need to be engaged as well. It's a matter of engaging with them and listening to them as well, and form that united front against imperialism as well. And I think that's you hit the nail on there, Pedro. It's all about engaging and listening to them, and I think that's what the experience is learning up there in the US. We can adapt things to Australia as well, but that's important. And and just for the First Nations people here, I'll just touch on some of the issues, that black deaths in custody, which is a huge issue. It's sensitive. I won't go into it completely. It is a sensitive issue. We had the stolen generations. They make up a bulk of the prison population. Although, mind you, most crime in Australia is committed by white people. Don't forget that. So, but the First Nations make up the bulk of the prison population. And they fight the day they're born, pretty much till the day they die. Even after, they face discrimination at all levels, and it's a long way to go. But also too, the lack of knowledge about their culture, their understanding of land, and this whole thing that trying to look at them as a primitive society was incorrect. They were an agricultural society, especially in the southeastern part of Australia. They did live in built structures. They did have built communities. They had ways they governed, ways they went about things, and completely different. And I mean, way we would do things, obviously, but they had that. And so I think it's I'll get that knowledge and understanding. But it's when I've done my lives as well, and when I acknowledge the traditional people, the First Nations of these lands, and that I acknowledge that their struggle is now part of a broader struggle against imperialism, and I think that's got to be respected right across the board. So yeah, thank you.
I'll add, be like David Fox too, because he also gets it. Yeah, be like these two gentlemen.
All right, thank you. I wanted, before we go on to the workshop, I wanted to give a special shout out to a brother in the audience who has a great channel and does great work, Brother Nick of the Flame of Liberation. I'll get into one of his more easy comments. He has made some critical comments here, and it's getting into some very controversial issues. And if Brother X doesn't want to respond, that's fine. But
I'm willing to respond. Sure,
that's fun. But I'll start off with this more timid one. Patriotic socialists advocate for destroying U.S. imperialism. This includes the independence of Puerto Rico, and that's absolutely true, and that's correct, and that's a correct and good thing. If you are a patriotic socialist in America, and the monopoly capitalists are destroying your neighborhood, you need to fight against those monopoly capitalists. And if those monopoly capitalists are extorting resources from the oppressed people and then using those resources to maintain their absolute power, so when we challenge them, we get crushed, then we support the nationalist movement. Patriotic socialists support the national movement. Now, people who are of oppressed nations, they do not have to support. Because they've never been truly part of America, they have the right to not accept patriotic socialism. And just by fighting for their people alone, rejecting American patriotism, they are on our side. They're fighting against the same enemy. Just because they're not using your exact tactic on an aesthetic doesn't mean that they're opposed to you or criticizing you, and they have the same enemy. That's not even really the critical one. I'm sure we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to raise this one, which is more critical. And I'm not sure how developed you are on this question or how far you've looked into it. But I also share some of the critics here with Flame of Liberation, but I don't like the way he phrased it. If critics of patriotic socialism or American socialism are truly not promoting liberal identity politics, then why do almost all of them promote Gerald Horne, who has unapologetically told people to vote for Biden?
Well, I can answer that question. Here's the thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't really know if about the last comment, so I'm not gonna mention it. But for the rest, here's why a lot of us support Gerald Horne. Because Gerald Horne, first of all, he's a black nationalist and a Pan-Africanist, and he knows his history. And second of all, he's pointing out the contradictions that we're talking about here right now. That's the main reason we support him. He explains to us why there hasn't been any for example, he talks about why there hasn't been any big movement that's like class movement across racial lines, and it's because of a lot of these issues. A lot of the older white community has been really chauvinistic to us and has been really racist to us, and we don't want to when they want to, but then when they want us to support them in a labor struggle, in a war, they try to get all buddy with us. And a lot of us just don't want to have it. Now, this doesn't mean that it cannot change. Gerald Horne has said it on a number of occasions, but we gotta come to terms with these things if we want to have this movement. Like, there's no other way to get past these problems. and Gerald Horne helps contribute to that conversation.
Maybe if I could, I respect
definitely.
Brother Gerald Horne's work as far as exposing racism, exposing the problem, and he's really good with history too. I think he comes at the national question from somewhat liberal perspective, not a Marxist-Leninist perspective, but he does, on a historical basis, show a lot of the problems of national oppression, what Black people and oppressed people in general have been through, and I think that is what you're respecting as well. Your comment as well. Now, I have major criticisms with Gerald Horne. And like I said, he's coming in more from a liberal basis, not a Marxist-Leninist basis. I think he underestimates the ability for solidarity. I think his position of telling people to vote for Biden is an absolutely stupid position. Like I think it's complete. It's not. He's a really smart man. He's a really smart man. And I put Cornel West in the same category, and I think they are making these ineffective strategies because they are privileged academics, and they're not completely in touch with the working class, who see it. If you look in the cities, in Democrat-held states, and you look at the Democratic Party, what is done to oppress people. The working class ain't down with the Democrats, not at all. If you look at the oppressed masses of Black and brown people, they're not down with the Democrats. And I think him promoting that is completely selling the working class people out. And also the same thing with Cornel West. What's your response to that before we go to the other issue? David Fox, before he responds, did you want to say something before he responds?
Yeah.
Maybe a response first from X. Go ahead.
Sure. Was that to me or to David Fox?
You go ahead and respond, because I put it out there. That was a little abrasive.
No.
But go ahead and respond.
No, it's totally fine. Like I said, I don't know much about Gerald Horne telling people to support Biden, but if he's doing it, that's obviously absurd. He should know better, because he's a Black nationalist. He studied Garvey. He studied Malcolm. I could never see Malcolm telling his Black nation or any other press nation to vote for who he'd call the Northern Fox. So he should obviously know better. As for Cornel West, I know about him supporting Biden, and I respect the brother. He's an elder. He's talked a lot about a lot of the same issues. He's even shown respect to my nation, the Puerto Rican nation, even going as far as to go to Puerto Rico and give Albizu Campos' granddaughter a hug, which was really endearing of him. But putting all those positive things aside, telling us to support Biden is completely absurd. I mean, this guy was best friends with Strom Thurmond. Like, are we really going to expect Strom Thurmond's friend to do good by oppressed nations? Like, no, that's not going to happen. So Brother Dust here is completely right in criticizing him the way he does. But just keep in mind, I still critically support him, because brothers like him and Gerald still help bring this conversation to the forefront. That's all.
David Fox, go ahead.
Look at the comments and discussions. I think it's morally important that we're going to come across all sorts of people in the struggle ahead. They've got differing views. Some of them are not even socialist communists either, against the struggle against imperialism. And there's got to be that respect with each other. Look, I don't know, pardon my ignorance about Gerald Horne. I don't know him. I just had to quickly look on the internet, find out who he was. But we do need to understand that we're against we've got to unite against a common enemy. Now, my work in the union movement, I come across all sorts of people with different views from mine. Not everyone's a Marxist, Leninist, or scientific socialist. People are sometimes hostile to that as well. But we're united against a common cause, against a common foe. And I like how Mao actually correctly pointed out, you broaden the base and narrow the target, not the other way around. We don't broaden the target and narrow the base. And that's why it's important we're talking about. We need to have First Nations people. We need migrant workers and migrant communities together. We need and other parts of the working class together, but also other allies as well out there. They might not share the same views and thoughts on things, but that's what it comes down to. United front against imperialism. And 2 years ago, during the COVID height of it, we were locked down. We had an international hookup with the Venezuelans, and there was a motion put up. There was work to form a united front against imperialism and fascism, which fascism is an extreme form of that. So that's where we need to be. And if we're going out there trying to criticise other groups to spend too much time where they could be a good ally, this is where we make a mistake. So that's, I think, why we're going to need to get back and focus and focus on that as well. But look, it's always times you give critical support to people. Obviously, that might not be Marxist, it might be liberal as well. But if they're actually doing something that's correct, you give them the critical support. And at a particular time, if it's to advance us further. I'm actually thinking sometimes the argument might be actually looking at strategy and tactics instead of what they think and then what we think, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think I have somewhat a unique perspective on this. Even the organization I'm affiliated with, CPI, my position at Working Class Revolt and some of the stuff that I do, I have an emphasis on the lower portion of the working class, poor Black and brown people. And I really do think we are the ones who have seen the brunt of the capitalist system. We know who the enemy is. We know who to attack. And from this position, I am very critical of every academic and their privileged class position and what they need to do to keep that class position. And some academics say some good stuff. And I think there's only two academics that I trust, that I know about. Well, three. If you look at Dr. Jose Prado, who actually goes to Cuba and does a study lecture and teaches in a poor school. I respect him. I know him. He did a study on Marx and Capital with brother, the Chicano poet, Matt Cedillo, and that's on my channel. You can look at it. I respect that brother. But two other academics, elite academics, that I respect are Parenti. And even he has, at least he says it in a way that's an academic and doesn't represent the voice of the people. And then Fur as well, who has been great on doing real history on Stalin and the Soviet Union. But the rest of them, I got major criticisms with. And I'm talking about Horn, I'm talking about Cornel West, and I'm talking about Richard Wolff, which is a lot of people like. There's a lot of Western chauvinism with Richard Wolff. If you look at his emphasis on, maybe he says some good stuff about the Soviet Union, maybe he says some good stuff about China, but his emphasis on European style co-ops and not recognizing the leading revolutionary force that China and the socialist countries are, that's Western chauvinism, plain out and straight and plain. Some of the good stuff that Richard Wolff does is he recognized the positive positive workers' fight back of the of the choice movement, of the body autonomy movement. He supported the truckers. He supported some of these labor revolts, some of these class issues. If you look at some of the internal class issues, that stuff that American patriots agree with, like I supported the trucker strike in Canada. And these, even though they're right wing and they're being manipulated by the right wing, this is people who are dissatisfied with the way COVID was being handled, the way it has been put on the workers and fought against it. Richard Wolff was good on that. Richard Wolff is not good at supporting anti-imperialist countries. And then let's look at figures like Gerald Horn, who I believe he minimizes the revolutionary potential of rural workers. This whole idea of critical race theory, which a lot of liberal academics buy into, that puts less of the emphasis on the monopoly capitalists as a whole and more on the white workers in general. I think that's a divisive, anti-Marxist, liberal opinion on him that hurts the class struggle. Another issue of Gerald Horne, and this is actually Prashad, the Indian academic who was weak on Ukraine recently. He took almost like a fence sitting position on that. He agrees with this. And the academic theory of the counter revolution of 1776, I think, is an absolutely absurd case of historical revisionism that basically downplays the severity and the destruction and the oppressive nature of colonial feudalism. And the sense is, yes, the American Revolution actually helped expand genocide in the West. And yes, a large part of the United States was slavery. But I mean, you had slavery under colonial feudalism. Colonial feudalism was holding everybody back. And then later on, the British supported the South in the Civil War. And if you look at this has been a purely academic phenomenon, the so-called counter-revolution of 1776. If you look at people like Simón Bolívar and Latin American revolutionaries, they were inspired by the American Revolution to kick out the absolute disgustingness which was colonial feudalism. If you look at Fidel Castro, if you look at Ho Chi Minh, if you look at Lenin, Letter to the American Worker, they see that as a positive revolutionary thing. I know I put a lot out there, but any response, brother Pedro X?
Well, as far as the Gerald Horne supporting the critical race theory, I don't know. The most I heard, I heard it from Ramiro, so you'll probably have to talk to him about it. But him and Erica Keynes from the All African People's Revolutionary Party said that Gerald Horne has his own critiques of critical race theory. But they know more about that than me, so you probably have to talk to them about it. But that's just to put it out there. As far as the counter-revolution of 1776, I haven't looked into it, so I can't really say agree or disagree on it. But the theory, from what I heard, is like I mean, it's interesting. I'll give it that. It seems like a fun read, but I don't really know much about it. Now, but I do want to say this though. You are right about, but I do want to agree with you on this. This other point you made, Dust, and it's true. Simón Bolívar, a lot of Latin and other Latin American revolutionaries were inspired by 1776, as were a lot of Haitians, the French Revolution, even Ho Chi Minh, and it's. I mean, I got some severe critiques of the quote unquote founding fathers, but I mean, at least they did so. At least it was okay that they at least, I mean, it was okay that it was pretty cool that they were able to kick out the British and have this massive effect. So, good for them. But I think we need to be careful in taking these figures at face value, because they weren't there to deal with the after effects of the American Revolution. They were not there with Tecumseh. They were not there with Chief Sitting Bull or Crazy Horse or Geronimo, who had to deal with the consequences of it, which were the negative consequences, which were the genocide of their people. These various nations, So I think we gotta have some caution when we promote that idea, but at the same time, for the sake of historical accuracy, yeah, we do need to point out that all these leaders you've mentioned did, and the movements that they led, did take some inspiration from 1776. That's all.
Respond to the brother, aka Obi, who's getting into, who's supporting the counter revolution of 1776. Revolutions
Oh,
are
of course they
supposed to.
didn't. Yeah, they didn't support Haitians. Of course not.
Okay,
I never said
revolutions
that.
are not supposed to increase. No, I'm yeah.
Yeah.
People, because the U.S. Didn't support the Haitians at all, and we understand that it was Haiti that gave materials. So
Yeah,
what I want to get into of why I believe the theory of the counter revolution of 1776 is wrong is not because the American Revolution. I'm not overestimating how revolutionary the American revolutionaries were. What I'm saying was that the colonial feudalism was even worse than that. Was even worse than that is what I'm saying. Like, so if the American Revolution didn't happen, would that have been a good thing for Haiti? Hell no. that would not have been a good thing for Haiti if the American Revolution never happened. You know, that was a step forward in history. And that's how I think a lot of people get confused when they say about a revolution. Like, if you look at the capitalist revolutions, were revolutions. What started capitalism was once revolutionary. You know, it overthrew something worse, feudalism. I think we cannot downplay how evil and destructive feudalism and outright colonialism is. And feudalism and outright colonialism are more create more genocide, create more slavery. Overall, if you want to get rid of slavery, you want to get rid of genocide, it would not have been better conditions under colonial feudalism. That's an absurd argument. And we're gonna go ahead.
Oh, I just want to respond. I'm just for the record. I'm not saying that the American Revolution, that the founding, quote unquote, founding fathers supported the Haitians. By no means. I'm just simply saying that their example was able to inspire a lot of these people to rebel, as well as the French Revolution. But you're right. The Haitians were, if you want to compare both of them, the Haitians were way more revolutionary than the quote unquote founding fathers. And yes, they did support Simon Bolivar and gave him all the help he got twice to liberate the six republics in Latin America from the Spanish Empire. But we just got to point out, for the sake of historical accuracy, that um, the quote unquote American Revolution and the quote unquote founding fathers did play a role in inspiring these movements that came afterwards. But by no means am I comparing them. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just pointing out that the small role it played. That's all.
You're on mute.
David, did you have a response before we go into the workshop portion? We're getting long. We're over time. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll just look just on that, and what we're referring to are higher economic modes. I mean, capitalism's a higher economic mode than feudalism. Its birth was in the womb of feudalism, and obviously became incompatible. Feudalism basically was incompatible with the growing capitalism, and that's how it came into being. And it was through revolution. Things come into being and things go out of being. And what we also understand is quantitative to qualitative change. So you have all these quantitative changes that which will lead to a qualitative change. So keep that in mind. But if you want to know about the how and who's better for who, obviously, that's got to be a class question. Which class does it benefit overall? I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yes, I just want to thank brother AK Obi for voicing his concern, and I'd love to reach out with you further. Please leave any additional comments or critiques. I'd love to go over them. We're a little short on time. I wanted to do is everybody good for going at least another 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay, so we're going to do a bit of a cultural workshop. What we do is we bring up a wrong position, and then we counter. We show you how to counter that wrong position. And I think we're going to do two of them. And I'm going to pretend to be a reactionary patriotic socialist who doesn't understand the national question, who is needlessly antagonistic towards oppressed people. And I'm going to pretend to be that. So, do you want me to put you on the spot, Pedro X, and have you respond directly, or would you rather have David respond first and then yourself?
I'll let David respond first since
Okay.
he's done this before.
Okay. We need to stop these radlibs. All these radlibs and ultras who write off the white worker. White workers are the majority in this country. White workers can have a revolution without anybody else. And we need to start talking like Trump. We need to appeal to white supremacists. We need to get out to only the white worker. It doesn't matter if we piss off black and brown people. We need to mobilize the white workers, even white supremacists amongst them. And then we can have a revolution. Then we can build power. Then we can overthrow the United States. We do not need to get along with poor black and brown people to have a revolution in the United States.
Wow. Where do I start with that? I think first of all, I think we've got to look at everything. The broad masses are not just white people. They include everyone from, as I said earlier, migrant workers, First Nations people, and various others, and also our allies as well. The fact is, racism is a product of imperialism. It's there to oppress. Racism basically, I'm trying not to be out of place here, but racism is basically national oppression. So we've got to recognise that. A way where we win everyone over, the way it is to build that trust, to get out there and build the infrastructures, build strong unions, building a strong community and neighbourhood groups, strong other assemblies as well, wherever comes into our mind, and empower people to come together. Listen to their concerns as well. We have to do a lot of listening as well, and look at their concerns and address them, and articulate the questions back. It's from the masses to the masses, and give them the power to go back. I think everyone, I think all the working class would have that revolutionary potential. But to understand this, everyone's not going to be thinking the same. It's literally humanly, scientifically impossible that everyone think the same, have the same view on it. The Chinese Communist Party has over 90 million members. Do you think they all have the same opinion on everything? No, they don't. This is what I understand. Us in the union movement, does everyone have the same opinion? No, they don't. It is scientifically impossible. What we understand is realise this class oppression, this national oppression goes hand in hand. They are tools by the capitalist imperialists to keep us going crushed and divided. It's only through unity that action is possible. If we're divided and leaving one section of the working class behind, or other oppressed groups behind, then we cannot alone perform that social change. Trotsky tried that. All right, Rodenbach wrote that, and Lenin argued against this very strongly against Trotsky when he was talking about the peasant question in Russia at the time. The working class, yes, it was the leading revolutionary class, it needed the peasantry as its allied to change forward. Trotsky didn't see that. There was some condition he added in for the peasantry. But if we're just going to isolate this section of the working class, the revolution will be doomed. For a start, you need to have your allies and the other potential revolutionaries there as well. I think that's what we're focusing on. When I talk about the working class, yes, there's a lot of them are white people, and that. But there's, as I said, also too emphasise there is also a lot of people from different other migrant backgrounds as well, such as various Asian nationalities, right through to various African ones, Indian. Western Asian. So I mean, but we all band together, and I think actually one thing is a great way to unite everyone, especially around an economic dispute as well. I love the old term. The best cure for racism is the union picket line, because really everyone's then united and focus. We've all got more in common than what we have different. This is what we are, and we develop further as a class. So we need to build that. And they'll build that movement and call for unity. And once again, I want to quote Miles' quote here, which is vitally important to remember. Broaden the base, narrow the target. That's what we have to do.
The brother Pedro X, how would you respond to someone who made such a certain statements?
Well, the first thing I tell that person is, um, first of all, when it comes to oppressed nation, well, first of all, no one, liberals and oppressed nationalists are not the same thing. They're two totally different things, completely. And I'll just explain. And it's really, and it all comes down to this: liberals might talk about certain issues and certain problems, but it's to sheepdog the masses back to supporting the status quo. And revolutionary nationalists, they want to lead their people to freedom in opposition to the monopoly capitalists, as Duss would call them. And so that's like, and they would never, ever, ever support any reformist solutions. So that's like number one. And number two, none of them has said anything against rural workers or white workers. Most of the time, they support their own people. That's who they're focusing on, and they're trying to let the movements of rural workers to be led by them, which is fine. So that's just debunks that assertion. As for white workers being the ones with the most revolutionary potential, I mean, it's not really about who has. Well, first of all, it's not about who has the most, but let's be real. The people who have just to address this, the people who have the most to lose, or the most to win, are the working class of these oppressed nations because they're the most oppressed and the most beat down. So logically speaking, they're going to be the ones with the biggest desire to bring forth change. Now that doesn't mean that white workers do not have that desire or that they don't suffer. Not at all. But just look who has it a little bit worse. It's who has it much worse. It's not that like 2 + 2 = 4. It's pretty easy to see. And um and putting that aside, uh if we really want to have a working class revolution here, the best way to deal with it would be under a broad coalition, as promoted by Fred Hampton, as promoted by the Poor People's March campaign. Well, campaign that MLK, that Dr. King was trying to lead prior to his death. Um, and the only way we're gonna have this is if we agree to if we agree to come together as equals with our own banners in this broad coalition, because it's like David Fox said, not all of us are going to agree. For example, I don't agree with an American patriot carrying the Star Spangled Banner, but I'm willing to put that aside for a broad coalition because to me that's much like building bridges is much bigger and much more important than getting into these disagreements. And also another thing, as long as that doesn't interfere with my people's freedom struggle, I have no issue with that. But yeah, like we're gonna need a but yeah, anyway, but yeah, we're gonna need a broad coalition uh that'll bring change in this country. Yeah.
Thank you, brother. I just realized somebody is going to clip that and use that as if I was actually saying that. That's absurd. They probably will. I don't care. This is a good thing. Shout out
I
to
hope not.
again. Shout out again to brother the Flame of Liberation.
I want to answer that. I want to answer to that. Here's the thing. I know that you don't say that, Flame. I know that Dust doesn't say that. But if you look at a lot of the drama that took place with Samira Khan's retweet and Haas having like 3 streams doubling down upon it, yeah, he's been like doubling down on indigenous sovereignty, doubling down on saying that the racist retweet doesn't matter, and not just him, but a lot of the members in his community. So yeah, they have these are patriotic socialists saying that. No one's saying all of them do, but it's a fact. Just look at all the all the arguments that took place. Look at or hear some of the conversations that Dust had with certain patriotic socialists and him getting mad at them. This has been happening. I don't know where you've been.
So I just want to give a special shout out again to Brother Nicola, Flame of Liberation. Please go back and look at his work on Ba'athist Arab socialism. I believe him to be one of the leading experts in that field. He's a lot of great work on that. He's also been on the show before. Please get out and subscribe.
And his reports on Russia, they're really good. I want to point that out because despite this little disagreement, he's a really intelligent brother and he has really good work. And his 3 works on what's happening in Ukraine have been really good, as well as the work that Dust pointed out, which is his work on Arab socialism, Baathism. It's really good.
Brother Fox, you have something?
Look, I've been observing from a distance, and obviously, Pedro, you've talked to me before about what happened. I think what's got to understand, comrades out there that will watch this, stop buying it. Also, too, and we acknowledge has done some brilliant, fantastic work. There's also one thing communists, of course, have got to practice as well, is proper criticism and self-criticism. When a comrade's wrong, that needs to be pointed out and needs to correct it by self-criticism. We all have to do that. Why? To improve our work further, all right? To improve ourselves. But we do not kick a person when they're down. What we do is put our hand out to help the comrades to lift themselves up and further development. That's where it's got to be done properly, and it's also going to be done in a mature and presentable fashion. Not have a big blowout on social media and everything else, because guess who's watching? Our class enemies. They're watching, and I bet you they'll be having a great laugh about that. And also, just be careful too, comrades out there. Be careful what you put up on social media or on lives. You are being watched, not by corporations or not for marketing gestures, but what I call intelligence gathering. Okay, you just be aware about that, Tom. And if you work for a company, big or small, especially a multinational, they'd have their people watching you as well. And so just always take that into consideration, comrades. Look, we've got to stop emotional about it. As I said, look, I do watch Haas when I can. I'm really busy, but he says some really good stuff, and I actually respect that work as well. But when a mistake is made like that, I thought it was a bit of bad taste there, to be honest with you. However, it was pointed out, and it could have been some correction put onto that. But look, it's been done. I think what the most important thing is everyone, all comrades out there and other friends as well and fellow workers, let's learn from this and let's learn from it and think, okay, what went right, what went wrong, what can we do to improve ourselves further? And I think that's part of this discussion today. That's what it is. AKA, once again, criticism and self-criticism. It's a good thing to have. It's not a personal attack. It's nothing that at all. But we always have to remember that we've still got our hands out to those and help each other, lift each other up. And I think that's what we've got to put that line back in the sand. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Let's see. I think the thing I wanted to say to Comrade Flame of Liberation, no patriotic socialists say that. Well, I was purposely overplaying it as well. But at the same time, if you look at some of these deep, dark spaces out there on the internet, I'm not going to. We've been saying who it is, so I ain't got to say by name. But some of these like hyper on people out there who say they support this online, don't put up their face. They're putting out racism. They're putting out sexism. They're having a laugh. A lot of these people are from Europe, not even from the United States. It's a little crazy. Let's see. So we're going to do one more, and then we're going to end it. And I think I'm going to duck down a little bit, get a little shorter on this one. I lost like a foot. I'm a foot shorter now, but
you're the incredible shrinking man.
Basically, anybody who criticizes me is an enemy of our community. They need to be thrown out. You need to cyberbully. You need to block them. You need to stop them. If anyone says anything against me, they are against you. I don't even care if they're legitimate criticism. A legitimate criticism legitimizes all the other non-legitimate criticism. You either fall in line or get out. I don't care if you're a brown person or a black person. Somebody says something racist in our community. You're not allowed to attack them. You have to put up with that racism. Shut up and get in line. Brother David Fox, response to that.
Well, I mean, to respond to that, I would be actually basically I'd be asking someone to take a big chill pill for a starters and calm down, big time. In fact, they probably need a good stiff drink or I'm not going to promote drinking and that, but I think, look, the response like that would be a totally immature thing. They need to have a good look at themselves and think, hang on. And analyze every criticism. Analyze the criticism. If it's just a silly one, at times, you know what the best thing to do with something that's a silly comment, just delete it. Don't even respond to it. I've sometimes put things on Facebook and I've walked away from it. Simple reason I know I'm going to get some really stupid responses and that. Just let them have it. But if it's a genuine one or a proper one, you respond to it accordingly. That's how we have to do it. That's how we develop further. And it might be a legitimate criticism. Hey, you're going down the wrong path here. We think this is wrong for reasons X, Y, Z. Okay, let's have a look at it. And that this proves if our theory is right, or what we're thinking or what we're trying to do is right, or is it wrong? We have to, and if it's wrong, we have to look at something else to go about it. But we're not perfect people, right? We're not perfect. We don't get everything right at times. We're going to make mistakes, but that's all part of developing making mistakes. But if I had a response, someone come at me like that, well, I just go, look, until in such time you calm down, we can have a proper talk about this in a mature and presentable fashion. Look, let me be. But I'll leave the door open. Feel free to contact me.
Let's see, Brother X, what would be your response to such a statement?
Well, I'd probably start out with the first one that Brother David mentioned, and it's probably good to tell this person to calm down, because if you don't calm down, then there's not going to be a productive conversation. It's just that obvious. But putting that aside for a second, assuming this person does calm down, the first thing I'll tell them is that no human being is bigger than the movement. The movement is for the working class, and for higher ideals. If that's what also motivates some people, but it's bigger than any. But the point is, it's bigger than any one individual. And sometimes, if you do something that's wrong, in public, you're gonna get checked on it. And if it's legitimate criticism, you should be humble. You should take it, even apologize if need be, and then move on. Like, no one's gonna beat this beat your head with this one mistake forever. Just be humble, learn, and grow from it, because all of us have to grow. I have to grow, Brother Dust has to grow, David Fox has to grow, the audience has to grow, the individual who he's referencing has to grow. Like, it's a learning process. So it doesn't make you any worse than anybody. In fact, in many cases, if you're humble and admit that you were wrong, it makes you a much better person and a much more effective comrade in the future.
Thank you, Brother X, for putting that out there. These representations that I'm doing are not meant to represent anybody in particular, and they may even be over characterizations of that position. Just wanted to put that out there and say that. That said, where to start on somebody who would say something like that? Okay. I think so. A person who would say something like that, they think that they're strong. They think that the ID poll, rad lib, cry about everything. Oh, that's not right. I'm going to sit here in the street and cry about it because you're so wrong. That looks really weak. And I think they're trying to be like show this and they worship weakness. There's a thing about, you know, a lot of these people who don't actually want to win, the Trotskyites, they love revolutions that lose, but when somebody wins, like China or the Soviet Union, oh, Stalin was evil, China, Mao killed all these. They make up this stuff. They only want to praise the victim. They only want to praise someone. It's like this middle class liberal bullshit that they don't even really care about the people they're talking about. They just want to identify with the victim and feel moral superior that they identify with that victim. And I think the person that would say such a thing, they want to be a strong figure. They want to show masculinity. They want to be the opposite of this. And I think the reality is that is just as weak and just as crazy and just as infantile. I think there's a potential of being the opposite side of the same coin as the synthetic left. And that is where you're purposely over aggressive. You're purposely trying to create division. You're purposely saying stuff that will piss off, that will supposedly piss off the wokes. And in reality, you're pissing off working class, poor black and brown people who are rightfully angry of your absurdity. And you look weak, and you look dumb, and you're not coming from a position of power, because somebody who is strong and coming from a position of power, they don't have to look like a goddamn pompous clown. If you look at the way Putin speaks, very plain, very straightforward, goes in the room, everybody looks at him, he gets their attention. He goes into, Xi Jinping does this. He'll go into a room of executives, and they know with the state power and the power of the people that billionaires can be executed, companies can be seized. And he doesn't have to make debate bro the leaders of the companies. He just says, you're gone. You violated the rights of the people. That is a portion of strength, not pompous clown debate bro bullshit. Makes you look weak. It makes us look weak. It makes the entire movement look infantile. So stop it. Now, also, on top of that, position of strength, strong people and wise people invite criticism. They invite criticism because they know they are not perfect. And they know they can improve. And then if the criticism is wrong, they respond to it. But if it's right, they have the strength, they have the self-confidence in themselves to be able to look at something that's wrong with themselves, move on and improve from that. And you're not allowed to criticize me. What it leads to is weak, isolated organizations that implode on themselves. And it's absolutely unnecessary. It doesn't need to be happening. Now, this idea that in an organization that if you piss off women or if you piss off people of color, those people are just supposed to hit it on the head and not talk about it. That is dehumanizing. That is indignant. That nobody should have to go through racism or sexism in a revolutionary organization, and is not the victims of racism and sexism that are the wreckers, that are trying to destroy the movement. It is the racism and sexism itself not being challenged in those organizations. That is the problem with those organizations. That is the problem that needs to be dealt with. And if you truly care about the revolution and the movement, you need to address sexism and racism and bad form and these tactics, these ineffective toxic tactics. You have to address them and correct them. This ain't about trying to build the big. I mean, it's good to build a following, but at the end of the day, we're trying to reach the masses of the people. I'm from the South. I'm a worker in the South. Half my coworkers in my current job are black. The majority of the people around me were not white in the lowest position. The jobs in the sweatshops, in agriculture, in construction, and working class people, they don't say shit like that. Honestly, working class people are forced to live in communal structures. We share cars. We share phone plans with people. We cannot be bombastic and think only about ourselves and alienate everyone around us that's not like this. Working class people are in such bad situations. We need to develop communal support networks, and we can't be like the king of our little worlds. You know, we're constantly having to deal with people we don't want to build larger collective structures for basic survival. And this pompousness, this arrogance, it's completely antithetic to legitimate working class culture. I think that's I think I unloaded a lot there, but let's see, David Fox. Any response before we close up?
Well, I think that's right important that we always look at ourselves. I take a good look at ourselves sometimes, and look, acknowledge that. I also believe we're not in here to try and provoke people and character assassinate people either. A lot of people out there do a lot of great work and everything else, and we're not into doing that. And I think you're absolutely definitely right. Us working class people, we do not act like that around each other. Interesting. If I acted like that behaviour at a union meeting, God, I'd lose all those members. It just they'd walk away very quickly. So I mean, it's and believe me, I've been in some heated discussions at times too when people are hot-headed about things. But we deal with it in a proper way, but what way with some bit of respect amongst each other, and that's what's got to come down to. So a bit of respect, everything else. Admit, we've made a mistake. Admit to it, but apologise accordingly. Look, and move on. Learn from it. Move on, and still, comrades. It's some of the fights. It can start off something really small and just get, turning a molehill into a mountain. And I've got to get that back into context. But putting posts up. That's what I've said in the start. Be careful what you put up on the media or social media. Because you're only monitored, but also too, if you're not sure about something, put something up. Feel free to ask people, see what they think, get their views and thoughts on things as well. And not just sort of react to something, put something up, and then make it even 10 times as worse. And I think that's that should be a good way of good practice of doing things as well. But we've understand, and I totally agree, Dust. We don't act that way before. Sure, we have our arguments with people, but there's a common respect for each other as well. We all work here, we live here. We go shopping in the same shops. We do everything together, and it's quite a unique culture. And certainly working class people, if they see this sort of behaviour up on there, they're just going to go, no, thank you. We're walking away. We'll go and do something else. So we've got to be wary about that. And I think, we've I understand this is not about trying to rip people down or whatever. We actually do great work and give each other support as well. So I'd just like to leave it at that. Let's just work away. And sometimes we're not going to always agree on everything. Sometimes we just have to agree to disagree. It's simple. We're not. We can argue till the cows come home on a particular point or whatever. We're not going to agree. Well, look, agree to disagree. But the strength in that is at least you know who that person stands for or what they mean by it. Because if someone else turns around and said, "Oh, such and such said that," well, hang on, I know him very, very, very well. His position was on this, but I'll go and ask him now. And that way, you can actually uphold the truth a lot more and keep people more honest. Than we would if we're trying to hide, if we're trying to go down this other road. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Brother Fox. So we went on way longer than expected. I want to thank Brother Pedro X so much for coming on. I look to further work with you, comrade. I would like for you to have the final say.
Well, again, thank you for having me. It's been an amazing experience. I just want to say that David Fox is right. I'm personally not a worker, but I interact with a lot of workers from the Latino community, even workers in Puerto Rico. Don't get me wrong, they have a sense of humor. They like to joke around with each other, but they don't have any time for that bombastic behavior. If you carry yourself in an immature way, in a bombastic way, it's like you said, they're gonna walk away from you. They're not gonna give you the time of day. But if you carry yourself in a dignified manner, they're not gonna care what your social class is, they're going to listen to you, and they're going to respect you and even trust you. So, the best way, which means that the best way to reach the masses is to be principled, be mature, in all your ways of being. And also, when it comes to doing mistakes, like saying or doing something that may offend people from oppressed nations, listen, we're reasonable. Just talk to us. Listen to us. Let us know it was a mistake. And once you learn that it was a mistake and you apologize, we're gonna move on because we're not gonna hold any grudges. And yeah, that's it. It's not that hard. Be humble and learn and grow. That's it.
Right on. So we're going to finish with our chant from the Panthers. If everybody could raise their fist and speak after me. Dare to struggle.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
Dare to win.
Dare to win.
All power to the people.
All power to the
All
people.
power to the people.
Right on. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.